Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You get more information and find out about past shows at my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information about folks and individuals and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Neil St. Clair, retired professor emeritus at Mars Hill University, for being my guest today. And Neil, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this.
Hello.
Okay, and I should mention, Neil has long been one of my favorite folks, especially because I know him through a lot of his great work at Mars Hill University. He has a long career in academic and professional theater, working as a teacher, performer, director, musical director, stage manager, and set designer. And so the question I always ask Neil first when I meet somebody is, as a child, you grew up where?
I grew up in a small town, Vinton, Virginia, near Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay, and when you were growing up as a child in Virginia there, did you always know you wanted to be a theater guy?
No, not at all. My first ambition was to be a fireman.
A fireman?
But then, yes, then I thought I was going to be a doctor. And then I got involved in music and decided I was going to be a minister of music at a church because I sang in church choirs. And it's really interesting because nobody in my family had ever gone to college. And we had about 100 cousins. And my dad said from the day I was 3, when you go to college, you will do this. And I said, yes, sir. I didn't know how to go to college. So nobody knew how. So the minister of music helped me in that process. And he said, here are 3 schools you should consider: Mars Hill University, Bluefield College, and Carson Newman University. So he helped me. I made a tape. I applied to all 3 as a music major. Mars Hill was the first one I heard from. So I said, I'm going there.
So
when you
were a kid, though, so you were into music, or you were in church choirs, or?
Music, yeah. And I also I was an athlete. I played athletics as well. But I really like singing, and I really like music. And so I just guess that's what I naturally went toward, but I had never been in theater. I never did a play in school. I never did a play in high school. I was never on stage till I came to Mars Hill University, and I was in an opera.
What opera?
The Merry Wives of Windsor. Okay. It's a kind of a comic opera with Bill Thomas, who was a professor here.
Sure.
He played Falstaff, and I played Mr. Ford. And I was on stage, and I was having a good time. And I think I had like 2 facial expressions for the entire show because I didn't know anything about acting. I was just mainly singing, and I loved it. And so I started taking some theater classes, and I said, I like this. And then C. Robert Jones and Jim Thomas, the chairman of the department at that time, got me to do some plays. And I was doing plays and having a great time. And so at this one point, I thought, hell, maybe I want to go into theater. So I sort of changed gears a little bit. But I was already a junior and had done my junior recital. So I finished my music degree, came back to Mars Hill for a year and a summer. And the next year I graduated with a theater degree.
Well, I was going to say, your background, though, reminds me of an idea, Neil, I've never shared with you, but I've shared it with some people at Mars Hill. And maybe you're the guy that helped me do this. But sure. I have this great fundraising idea for Mars Hill University, or you name the organization, where everybody would create their very first role. In other words, you were in that show. You were in that show. Yeah. I assume maybe even before videotape, or did they have a record of the show anywhere?
Right. Oh yeah. No, there were no videotape or anything in 1972. But you want to know something interesting?
What?
I still remember all my songs that I sang in that show. It's unbelievable.
But tell me, that wouldn't be great fun to then do that.
Oh, I think it would.
Just a number. Everybody would do their very first role, so it could be a tree even, or whatever you were, your very first role.
Right.
Be able to show it.
Yeah.
to show it forever. So keep that in mind. I want to do that. If you
Okay,
want to do it with
that's a
me,
good idea.
just,
I'll keep that on the
it could
back
just be
burner.
a fun thing. We'll talk later about the reunion you're helping bring together. Everybody
Okay,
come back,
sure.
and that'd be the activity you asked them to do their first role. So you were in college, then you got active, went
Mhm.
back for a theater degree. Then when did you decide to have this become your profession?
Well, I'll tell you, there was a benchmark moment. I was having a meeting with C. Robert Jones. You know C. Robert.
Sure.
Uh, we were out on the quad at Mars Hill, and we were talking. And he said, "Well, Neil, I'm sorry, but I need to go to a faculty meeting." He turned around and he walked down the quad, and I watched him. And at that moment, I thought, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to be a theater professor, and I want to teach students, and I want to work with students. And that was a moment I'll remember.
And you remember that. Now, have you ever told him that story?
I have told him that
Okay,
story.
what a great
Yeah,
story. That
yeah.
he influenced your life and you want to become
And
like
that
him.
was the exact moment I wanted to be a college theater teacher.
So go from there. So how'd you become one? What happened?
Well, of course, I really like musical theater, and there were no musical theater degrees at that time. And Jim Thomas and C. Robert swear and avow that because I did that, they got the idea for a musical theater degree at Mars Hill. And so they put one together, and Mars Hill had one of the first BA in music theater degrees in the whole region. And eventually it turned into a BFA in musical theater. But when I left college, I knew I wanted to teach students about professional theater, but how in the world would I teach them about professional theater if I had not done it? So I went out, I went to SETC auditions, I went to auditions. Um, I got an internship at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., and I went to Arena and did an internship. And then I guess my first real professional show was an outdoor drama called Wilderness Road in Berea, Kentucky. And I went there for summer and did that. And from there, I got a job working at Diners Playhouse, a big dinner theater in Kentucky. And then I went there. And then he toured. I toured around, went to SETC. It was an artist in residence in West Virginia. And I met my wife, Kay, doing a production of Hair. He was doing a touring production of Hair,
Were you
the
both in
music.
it?
Yes, we were both in it. She played Jeannie, the little pregnant girl, and I was the musical director for the production. And I was a tribe member and sang in all the specialty numbers. It was just a fun show to do. And we kind of got hooked up and started dating, and the rest is history, as they say. So we did that, and then we went to SETC together. In fact, we did the artist in residence gig together. Went to West Virginia. They had a grant. We put together a little show and we toured it to every backwoods school in West Virginia. And we would go in and do music and do monologues and do scenes. And I was the narrator, and they all had on these like jumpsuits and things. I had on bib overalls and a guitar because I was also the musician for the show. And at the end of the show, we played Almost Heaven, West Virginia. And as soon as we hit that chord, those kids went wild. It was it was amazing. It was like the national anthem of West Virginia. And they all would sing, and they'd jump up around, and they were clogging and just having the greatest time. It was so much fun.
And you were doing this at the time with Kay? She was in
Uh-huh.
with you?
Yeah, yeah. We were married by then. Yeah.
Okay, how cool is touring around the country? So what brought you to Mars Hill then? To come back to
Well,
Mars
it was
Hill?
actually interesting because I had done my gig as a professional theater. So I said, okay, time to go to school. So Kay was from Texas, and we moved down to south of Houston, and I had to get a job because I needed to make some money before school started. And I got a job at Jack in the Box. And I was serving hamburgers and things at Jack in the Box, and I could walk from my apartment over there. But I applied to several schools, and I got accepted at the University of Houston. and I got a teaching assistantship, which kind of was my first little teaching job. And I went there, got my MFA, did a internship at Houston Grand Opera. I got an internship as part of my degree. Also, when I was there, I was a professional mime. I was in Claude Coe's mime troupe, and for a year and a half, we did mime shows, and I'd go around to offices and schools and malls and perform as a professional mime. So that was really cool. But I did Houston Grand Opera, worked with some great folk. I was assistant to Hal Prince. I don't know if you know who Hal Prince is.
Yeah.
He was a big deal. He came and directed a musical. And also, they did the first magic flute opera that used the Maurice Sendak scenery. The scenery was like a Maurice Sendak book. And Maurice came down, and I was his assistant and got to work with him. And there's the part in the play where Papageno comes over to the orchestra pit. It was real presentational. And he asked for a drink of water, and he asked for a couple of things. But because it was Union House, the musicians could not hand him the water. They cannot handle the prop. So they put me in a tux and gave me a violin. I sat in the orchestra pit like I was playing. And then he came over, and I stood up on the chair and handed him a cup of water and a couple of things. And I didn't tell Kay I was going to do that. And she was watching the show with her sister. And she said, "Oh my God, I know that bald spot on the back of that guy's head. That's Neil." And it was. And she was just flabbergasted. But it was fun.
When you were working with Prince, did you say to yourself, "Hey, this guy has something"? Or could you see that?
Oh, yeah, he was great. And, I got to work with him, and, I got to get his coffee and do some other things. But I also got to go out with him a couple times to dinner and kind of pick his brain about directing and learn some really good stuff. And then that's when I came to the major crossroads. Houston Grand Opera offered me a professional job, but I also had applied and gotten a teaching position at A-Leaf Elsick High School, a huge 5A high school in Houston. So here I am. Do I stay in professional theater, or do I take that first step in my teaching career? And I took that job, and I worked there for 2 years. And then I got my first college teaching job, what is a small university in Central Texas, Howard Payne University. I called it Mars Hill West because it reminded me a lot of Mars Hill. Small liberal arts, Baptist related school. I went there. I said, "Oh, I'll be here a year or two and I'll move to the big times." I built a program. I was there 17 years.
Wow.
And during that 17 years, I took a year and a half off, went to Texas Tech University, did my PhD work, postgraduate work, came back, and then Mars Hill called me. They said, "Neil, Jim Thomas is retiring. You want to come up and interview for the position of department chair of the theater arts department?" And I said, "Oh, free trip to the mountain?" Yeah, because I didn't think I would get it. And I had a great program going, but I came, I interviewed, I got the job. I came to Mars Hill in 2000 as head of the theater department and production manager at SART. And the rest, is history. I'm still here.
It sort of reminds me of one of my favorite films. You may know it, Sliding Doors.
I don't know that. No.
Someday, if you catch it with Gwyneth Paltrow, and the premise is your story about how life is a series of decisions. And if you make one decision, your life will go one way, and if you make another decision, your life will go another way. So I think Kay and you would love it because it's your story. How do you make these decisions?
That's
and
right.
Had you not done that, we wouldn't be talking today.
Probably not. No. But I have loved Mars Hill from the day I set foot on campus. And the interesting thing is, in those days, they didn't have internet. I had never set foot on campus. I never saw a picture of Mars Hill. I didn't know anything about it, except they accepted me as a music major. My parents drove me 5 hours down from Roanoke, Virginia, dropped me off, never set foot on campus, never seen a picture, and left. And I loved it from day one.
And talk about then your experience at Mars Hill, because it's kind of an interesting guy. So you made it back. That's kind of exciting to come back,
It is.
after
Yeah,
you'd gone
yeah.
there. So you returned in 2000, and as I
Mhm.
read in your background, you then kind of did, it seemed, even as I knew you, you did like everything when you were at Mars Hill,
Yeah. Oh,
in
well,
terms of
yeah.
not only teaching, but talk about the other thing you did. So you were involved in teaching. And what I loved about Mars Hill, especially some of the stuff you were involved in, is there were two things. So there was the professional theater, we'll talk about saw it,
Right.
but there's
Right. Mhm.
also the department itself. And
Right.
what so impressed me, Neil, and again, I knew you when you were involved in it, were some of the musical productions that were involved with the students were, I won't say as good, if not better sometimes, but boy, were they good.
Oh, they were fabulous. Yeah,
Yeah,
Blaine. And we were so fortunate. And one of the reasons we were good is because at that point in time, Mars Hill Theater Department had several incredible things going for it. It was small liberal arts, had a BFA in musical theater. It was accredited by the National Association of Schools of Theater. It meant it had a dynamite program, and it was affiliated with a professional theater, SART, so the students could come and start working with SART while they were still students and put professional credits on their resume. And if you did a Google search with those parameters and hit the button, Mars Hill College came up first. And
well,
so we got incredible students from all over the country. We had students from Texas, from Maine, from Washington State, from Florida, from Georgia coming there. And we had a department that had a musical theater program of about 24 top musical theater majors. So it was a strong program. And what that did was it allowed us to do shows like Thoroughly Modern Millie and Pirates of Penzance and some of the great big musicals we did, and they were top quality shows.
and like you said, I loved seeing them, and I almost loved seeing them almost as much as I enjoyed the professional theater. It's
Oh yeah,
just
well and many of those students
yeah,
played lead roles in SART as juniors and seniors,
yeah.
so they were getting their professional chops there, like Amanda Ladd.
Okay.
And she was one that came through. So many of these students that came through our program have gone on and did great things. In fact, Amanda will be acting in a show at SART later this year, and in fact, Amanda plays a lead role in the podcast that we'll talk about in a little while.
And what's exciting about Amanda too, she came back, I think it was last year. She was in that one woman play.
Right. Oh, it
And
was
boy,
dynamite.
what a talent. And then, like you said, and you and I have talked about this, almost like the golden era, when you would snap
Mm-hmm.
up these musical majors, and every one of them was like amazing. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess, it's still so it's still not Mars Hill is still very good, but it's not quite that era when you had
Well,
24,
and you know what? All small liberal arts type
right?
schools are seeing this kind of decline. I think because there are not as many students that are going, and there are lots of factors. But everybody now pretty much has a BFA in musical theater. In those days, we were pretty unique, but now almost every school has musical theater, and there are certain schools that have perhaps maybe slightly better facilities or other things, but it's a common scene across the country. Many of these small liberal arts schools are having trouble getting enough majors. It's just part of the way it is.
Remind me also, I can't recall off the top of my head, but with Mars Hill, when you were doing the productions, were
Mm-hmm.
you using live musicians too at the time?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
mostly always live
And
musicians.
so I won't get off on my kick on that, but I still love live music,
Me too.
Um,
Yeah.
and I love the argument, well, it's very expensive to have live musicians, but that'd be, the same thing. We could have actors who lip sync, we can have music that,
That's right.
tracks.
Yeah,
Why don't we
that's
just have,
right.
you don't need actors. So that's one of the things I loved about it too. You actually see a musical and you
Yes.
see live musicians, very, very exciting stuff.
Well, and a lot of those live musicians were Mars Hill music majors
Right. Great
because they had
tie-in.
a fantastic music department, and those kids would come over and play, and they were getting experience playing in these small ensembles and bands. And it was just really a nice relationship across the street from the music department to the theater department and back and forth.
From your college days, do you have I'll put you on the spot, a favorite
Sure.
show or a couple of shows that you remember most about that you put on?
Yeah, one of them would be A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And I remember that specifically because there was a particular part I really wanted badly. And I probably wasn't really right for it or ready for it. But anyway, the way it turned out, guess who played that part? Jim Thomas played that part.
Okay.
And he was a faculty member. And I was cast as one of the 3 Proteans,
right?
Which was just, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I got to play so many different kinds of roles and so much comedy and slapstick. I learned more from playing that role about acting and relating to an audience, I think, that I did from just about any other show. And it was just one of the best written comedies, with great music, and one of the funniest shows I would say I've ever been in. One of my favorite musicals.
How about student productions? Do you remember a favorite student production that you directed or put on?
Oh, sure. I can name 4 or 5.
Okay, a couple.
There was 2. One was The Curious Savage, which was one of my early productions, just a delightful show, well cast, had Brad Call in it, had, several of the students. Who else was in that? Well, anyway, I won't waste time, but the other one was The Foreigner.
Okay, yeah.
I directed The Foreigner, and it was as good as a Sartre show, in my opinion. Those kids were absolute great. It was one of the funniest shows I ever directed.
I was going to say serious dramatic role. No, but I love the show.
Well, and then, oddly enough, a number of years later, Sartre did The Foreigner.
I remember, yeah.
And I played Froggy, and my wife Kate played Betty. And that was the first time we had acted on stage together in like decades. And it was the first time our children ever saw us act together on stage. And it was just a wonderful show. In fact, it was so good, Sartre revived it the next year, and we played it 2 years in a row.
Okay, yeah, I just remember, and you bring back memories of, great stuff that Sartre did. So you taught all these years at Mars Hill, and you were also involved at the same time. You were involved in a lot of the Sartre productions.
Oh yeah, when I came to Mars Hill, not only was I the director of theater, I was the production manager for Sartre. So in the summer, I was in charge of all the production, set, props, lights, costumes, all the production aspects, and I did that for, I think, 8 or 9 years, and then when my children got a little bigger and were having a lot of activities and things, I gave that up and continued as department chair. But yeah, I've worked on many, many Sartre plays in a lot of different capacities.
Well, give a shout out for Sartre, because for a lot of people, believe it or not, still don't know Sartre. And it's a shame because it's so much fun to go up there. It's so easy to get to. And a lot of people in Nashville, I remember when I was involved in the Sartre board, the concern was it's too far away or it's not Asheville, but it's like 20 minutes, 25
it's like,
minutes.
18 minutes from downtown Asheville.
Right. And so the benefit of the folks who haven't been there, and we'll encourage them to get there, especially this coming season, what is Sartre? Or describe it, if you would, please.
Sartre is a regional professional theater that does a variety of shows. One of the things that set Sartre apart from other shows is that when it was formed, we always did an Appalachian play that portrayed Appalachia in an honest and excellent way, and the people and the issues of Appalachia. And the other thing that set Sartre apart was the new play series. We would have a lot of people send in new plays. We would read them. We had a play reading committee, and one of those plays was chosen and given a full professional production. And I don't know how many plays Sartre produced, and several of those plays were dealing with Appalachia. So Yeah.
And one of the things I always admired about Saw It is the fact that, as you said, it gave a chance to some of the students to be involved
Hmm.
in it. But I was
Hmm.
also very impressed, Neil, with the fact that everybody got paid, including the
Uh-huh.
students. And
Hmm.
that was like very unusual. And there's an argument I have even now with a lot of folks, that if you're
Yeah.
in theater, you should get paid. It shouldn't be all
Yeah.
volunteer. So to get for sometimes their first professional gig, but to get paid well, working at some group, I think that was really cool.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah,
And they got free housing. So
right.
they got free housing plus a decent salary.
Yeah,
And so they were really working in a professional format as students. And SART brought in directors from New York. They brought in equity actors. I remember we did a little Reader's Theater version, brought in Pat Hingle
I remember.
and
Yeah.
Betsy Palmer and did love letters. So it truly was a top-notch professional theater at that. Yeah, it really was. And that was very unusual for a small Appalachian town in Madison County, North Carolina.
Good stuff. Now let's talk about some of the other things you alluded to. One, you mentioned too, that like this is a webcast, you also have a podcast. Talk a little bit about that, Neil. What is
Oh,
that
yeah.
about?
It was really interesting. A man by the name of Jerry Jacover, he came and visited the Rotary Club one time, and he had a book, and I read it, and it was pretty good. And a number of years later, I got a call from one of the Rotarians, Sandy Stevenson, and she said, well, this guy is looking for somebody to kind of help him cast a podcast he wants to do about Madison County. And I, of course, gave him your and Bill's name. And so, anyway, we got together and he has this podcast. It's a 19 episode podcast and is called The Land of Milk and Honey. But land is spelled Lande because one of the families in the play or radio play is the Land family. And it deals with a young man who was blind adopted at birth in Asheville. His father had been killed in Vietnam. His mother had terminal cancer. He was blind adopted. And he goes with his adopted parents and grows up in Madison, Wisconsin. And so he becomes a doctor, and he gets to that time when he has to go do his 2 years in a clinic somewhere to help. So he decides he'll come to Madison County to look for his roots. So he goes from Madison to Madison, and he comes here and ends up finding more than he bargained for. And it is a lovely story about uh, the goodness of people everywhere, about opportunities for redemption, and and it is stars some of the great SART people and Mars Hill people. Uh, Bill Gregg is in it. He plays a lead role. His wife Liz Aiello is in it. My wife Kay plays the lead role. Amanda Ladd plays a role. Even I play a role or two. One of my big parts is ambulance driver. I have 3 lines. But then later in the play, I play Henry Land. He's the patriarch of the Land family. And it is a beautiful little show. It plays on WART radio. It airs on there Saturday at 10, Monday at 2. And we're in this Saturday, we will be episode 14. But however, it is on Spotify. So if you would like to go back to episode 1 and listen, you can go back and listen to it. And we're working on episodes 16 and 17 right now.
So you and Bill wrote this, or
No, Jerry Jacover wrote
gotcha.
it, but he didn't know anything about putting it together. So Bill and I did it, and we got the black box. I arranged for all the sound equipment. Christy Salver, who is the head of the Mars Hill audiovisual department, she helped us an incredible help. And we got all these actors, all of them volunteered to do it. We're doing it free. And it's just been a wonderful experience to get hooked up back with those actors. And I think you would really enjoy the story if you want to go listen to it.
So you're taping this, and you tape this, and how are you doing this? The production
We
of it?
taped it in the black box. We read it. We taped it. Liz Aiello is the narrator. She did the narration in her sound studio. And then we brought it to Christy. Christy put it together. Jerry's son wrote the original music for the theme song. Christy has put in sound effects and things. So it's all been put together right there, pretty much on the Mars Hill campus.
As you're talking about it, Neil, I'm thinking to myself, this would also be, I don't know if you thought about it, but kind of a good show. Do you ever see?
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's talk about maybe doing a show, but there's also talk about maybe trying to do a film script.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be a great little movie to put on some of the Hallmark channels or some of those things. So who knows? We'll see
just
where
as
it goes.
describing it, you're getting me interested in it. And that's one of the great things about Neil St. Clair, that just to listen to you gets me interested in stuff. And for example, I have to digress because I remember it was such a thrill the first time I think met you or spoke with you in your office at Mars Hill University.
Yeah,
and just describe it, Bill, Neil, because it's unlike any other office I've ever seen. And talk about just. And you mentioned to me it's downstairs, so we won't see it today. But just talk about some of the things you even had in your office.
Oh, well, I have always been a collector.
Right.
Let's say I'm a collector. I collected comic books. I collected gum cards. I collected movie posters. My first real big collection was a lunchbox collection. And there was great debate amongst they had lunchbox people had a rating system. You could be a lightweight boxer, a bantamweight boxer, a medium weight boxer, a heavyweight boxer, a super. Anyway, there was debate if I had the second or third biggest lunchbox collection in the world, because I had nearly 600 children's lunchboxes that spanned from the 1930s to 1985. And it was just fun. And it's really interesting how I started collecting. I always wanted to have a hobby I'd never heard anybody did. And way back when I was in graduate school in Houston, I didn't hear anybody that collected lunchboxes. And so I was in graduate school. I didn't have any money. So for fun, on Saturday, I would go around to all the secondhand stores and the Goodwill stores and the Salvation Army stores looking for science fiction things and collectibles and action figures, because that was one of my collecting. I found a Bonanza lunchbox from the TV show Bonanza, and it was brilliant. Had all the characters full color embossed and all. I picked it up 10 cents. I said, I'll pay a dime for a Bonanza lunchbox. And so I started just collecting lunchboxes. And I'd come home with 2 big bags full of lunchboxes and paid about $4 for them. And then people started hearing that I collected. And all my family and friends, they went to their attics, they got their kids lunch. Every week I'd get a box of lunchboxes in the mail, and they started piling up. And then they started doing all these cool lunchboxes for like Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and all of that stuff. I started collecting those. And pretty soon they had taken over one entire bedroom in our apartment in case that I think these lunchboxes are breeding. But I just kept doing it, and it was a lot of fun. And I finally got to that collection. And when I lived in Brownwood, we had a garage, and 3 of the walls all the way around the garage were floor to ceiling shelves with lunchboxes on. I have to show you some pictures of that sometime, Blaine, but it was fun.
So where are these lunchboxes now?
All over the world, because in about 1990 or 1991, I had 2 little girls, and I had moved them 2 times, and I never wanted to move them again. And so I sold them. I sold pretty much all of them, except just a handful that I kept, and ended up making pretty good money on them, and helped send my girls to college. So it was a good thing all the way around.
I'm picturing in my mind, not only the lunchboxes, but you also had this collection. Describe it, because it just knocked my socks off, of the action figures.
Oh, yeah. In my office, I had action figures all around the wall, and I have, everybody gets G.I. Joe or, Star Wars or Star Trek. I had action figures like Albert Einstein and Moses and Crazy Cat Lady and all these real weird esoteric action figures. You saw some of them.
Right.
Mozart, Beethoven, Sigmund Freud. Yeah, it was really fun. And of course, like I said, I was a collector and I still collect, and I still have a pretty extensive collection of vintage toys, action figures, robots, Godzilla, you name it, I got it. And it's kind of like my passion, my hobby.
And you mentioned kind of a key word, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It was fun. And a compliment to you, it's always fun to come into your office, for two
Yeah,
reasons. Not only to see your collection, which I always admired,
yeah.
but just to listen to you, because even listening to you now, the cool thing is that you always seem to have fun with what you were doing.
I try to have
Yeah.
fun every day.
And you have this great smile you've always had. And segue from there, Neil, if you would, into something you're working on now as we speak, that's going to be happening at Mars Hill, I think, was
Mm-hmm.
in September. Is that the date?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What are you working
September
on?
27th and 28th. I have decided it's time for us to have a all-call theater arts family reunion. So we're going to have a big get-together um, on the Mars Hill campus, September 27th, 28th. We're calling all former faculty members, professors, majors, minors, just students who worked in shows on theater to come back for 2 days, and we're just going to visit. We're going to have fun, and as a part of that, I'm just a boy who can't say no, to quote Oklahoma. So I felt like somebody needed to kind of gather and organize the Mars Hill Theater Arts Archives, which has just been upstairs in Spillman in those closets and in boxes and stuff here. So I've taken upon myself to gather and organize over 100 years of Mars Hill theatrical activity, programs, flyers, reviews, pictures, videotapes, DVDs, you name it. And what I'm going to do is take all of that once I've organized it and take the black box theater, and I'm going to put tables all the way around, and we're going to have a gigantic memory lane. We're going to have tables for the decades, tables for faculty members, tables highlighting showstoppers, Alpha Psi Omega, even a table for Susan King, Belle of Amherst. She has done that show. The first time she did it was 1978. And now she just finished doing a production a couple of weeks ago over at a church in Hendersonville. And she is amazing. So I'm going to kind of highlight that. So students can come back, they can see their friends, they can see their professors, their classmates, and just have fun.
Wait, you
Just
mentioned something else we forgot to talk about, but another
yeah.
thing I'd always admired you for was a group you mentioned, and I don't know if they're still in existence, but what was Showstoppers?
Yeah, Showstoppers is going to have a major event too. Showstoppers was the musical performance ensemble that C. Robert Jones put together back when he created the musical theater degree. And Showstoppers was a group of select musical theater majors that met as a class. They put together shows, they put together performances, they went out in the community, they performed at university events, like they performed at Dan Lunsford's inauguration when he became the president. And we used them for recruiting. They went out to high schools and recruited, and it was an amazing group. And we've had a number of great directors of that through the years, including me and DeWitt Tipton and Paul Shearhorn and who else? Joel Rogers, Cynthia Perkins, C. Robert Jones. So yeah.
Is Showstoppers still in existence?
Yes, it is in existence now. It's not quite as vibrant and quite as extensively going out like it used to, because the numbers are down. So we got to figure out some way to get those numbers back up. Yeah.
Two final questions,
Sure.
Neil St. Clair. First, it being that if somebody's listening, wants to consider can you imagine, wants to consider a career in theater,
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend to them? What should they be doing?
It'll depend on what they want their theater career to be. Do they want it to be a performer? Do they want it to be in administration, like stage management or theater administration? Do they want to be in education? Do they want to teach high school? Do they want to teach on the college level? What do they want to do? And probably the best thing they could do, if they've got some questions and they want to contact me and tell me kind of what they're interested in, I could probably give them some more specific information.
By the way, hold that thought and not hold the thought, but let
Mhm.
me address that because I was going to ask you, that was the final question I was going to ask
Okay.
you. But if folks want to get in touch with Neil St. Clair, what's the
Yes.
best bet?
Call my agent. No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
Or call Kay.
Yeah, call Kay. She'll say
Right.
no. Just contact me. I've still got my same Mars Hill email, NSTCLAIR, Neil St. Clair at MHU.edu.
And so that's
It's
the best way
simple.
to, that's the best way to get in touch with you.
Yeah, that's the
Also,
best way to get in touch with me.
you also are on Facebook?
Yes, I am on Facebook. So, you could contact me there if you're on Facebook and I don't know, I'm not real good on Facebook. I don't know if anybody can contact me there or you have to be a friend.
You have to
I don't
offend,
know
yeah.
how that work. But yeah, probably the best way would be to just email me. Mhm.
And out
Yeah.
of all the stuff you've done, and you've sure done a lot of stuff, do you have a favorite thing you like? In other words, there's directing, backstage work, acting.
Mm.
Do you have a favorite theater type thing you like doing?
Teaching.
Teaching?
Yeah, teaching. I'm a teacher. The biggest joy I get is working with a student, bringing them in at a certain level, working with them, watching them progress, getting them to the point where they're ready to spread their wings and fly, and help them get that first position, and then see what they do, see them succeed. That's my favorite thing.
And as a compliment to you, I always got a kick out of the fact that one, not only are you still in touch with a lot of them, but it's just I'm getting a chill, but a good chill is to hear them talk about you, and saying this is long after they were students of yours,
Yeah.
but see them many years. It's amazing how many you're still in touch with, and
It's amazing. I'm still in touch with many of my high school students.
God bless.
And one quick thing, when I put all the pictures on my Facebook page from the Mars Hill shows advertising the theater reunion, all my Howard Payne students said, "Where's our pictures?" So I had to go back and I had to go through 17 years of Howard Payne pictures and put their pictures on my Facebook. And now they're demanding a theater reunion. And I think I'm going to be doing that fall 2025.
In your spare time. Neil, I love it. Pleasure as always. I look forward to seeing you, if not in September, hopefully over the summer at Mars Hill. And just whatever you do, keep it up. I appreciate you.
Well, let me tell you, you're invited to the theater reunion because we consider you a theater person.
And I have it
please
down
come if you can.
in September. Neil, you be well. Best of care.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.